from the
하겠습니다.
keynote speech, we'll
첫
be
번째
able to learn
연설을
more
함께
about
하실
today's
특별한 분
topic.
소개해드립니다.
Let me
코리
introduce
맥켄, 페어
first keynote speaker.
테라퓨틱스 대표님이십니다.
It's President and CEO Corey McCann of Pear Therapeutics.
Hi, I'm Corey McCann, the Chief Executive Officer of Pear Therapeutics. I'd like to thank the conference organizers for having us, and I'd like to voice my excitement for the future of prescription digital therapeutics in Korea. During my time today, I may be making some forward-looking statements, and so I'd like to just display the standard disclaimers. And I'd like you to think about where we currently stand moving out of COVID, when remote care has become standard for all of us. Bring together with that the growing burden of chronic disease, both in the US and in Korea, and marry that with a pronounced provider shortage, where in many indications, patients don't have clinicians that they can currently see. Bring together with that the fact that technology is pervasive, and in many countries, we are on our smart devices and phones the entirety of the day. All of these factors converge to create what we believe is a massive opportunity for software that treats human disease. We believe that software can treat most diseases. And I know that that is a bit of a bold statement. And so what I'd like to do is just walk you through a number of different indications where software either has already or is in the progress of changing the way in which we treat disease. So first, take addiction. And this is a place where more than 20 million Americans suffer from different addiction conditions, yet only 10 to 20% of those patients receive care for their addiction condition. Here, there are already smartphone applications that have been approved by regulators in order to treat addiction, in order to enhance a patient's abstinence from their substance of abuse, and in order to help those patients be retained in treatment. Those smartphone applications have been approved by the US FDA. They've been distributed nationwide, and they are becoming current standard of care. Next, I'd like you to think about conditions like insomnia and pain, where currently patients have one treatment and one treatment only, and that is a set of pharmaceutical medications with either habit-forming or frankly addictive side effects. In those conditions, currently there is a US FDA-approved product that is able to treat insomnia, and it's able to do so in a long-term way such that patients are able to stay off of their habit-forming medications like benzodiazepines or like zolpidem. And there are a number of companies that are developing treatments for chronic pain that are software-based that provide patients with an alternative to opiates. Lastly, I'd like you to think about conditions like oncology, where currently patients are only able to receive medications with dose rate limiting toxicity. Here, there's a tremendous opportunity for the creation of software that senses a patient's physiology, that predicts the onset of dose rate limiting toxicities, and that modifies a drug in order to be able to optimize human health. This is really the world that we're putting forth at Pear, and it's one where pieces of software can help people in the way that drugs traditionally help people today, that those pieces of software can do so without drug-like side effects, and that those pieces of software can either do that alone or in combination with drugs to make those drugs more effective. What I just described in the US is a new space that's called prescription digital therapeutics, or PDTs. Prescription digital therapeutics are software to treat human disease. And this is a new field that, like health and wellness apps, utilizes digital technology to improve human health. Like pharmaceutical products, these products are tested in randomized controlled trials, or RCTs. The products are evaluated by regulators in the US, like the FDA. And these products are utilized, paid for, and distributed much like drug products. Unlike either health or wellness apps or traditional drugs, PDTs are able to provide real-time feedback to clinicians in order to enrich the patient-clinician experience. At Pear, we believe that this is a whole new modality of treatment and that there are hundreds of opportunities to create PDTs to treat different disease conditions. PDTs really sit at the intersection of remote monitoring, of telemedicine, of healthcare, IT, and of health and wellness apps. And this new modality really takes a bit of each of these parts of digital health and brings it together in order to treat human disease directly with pieces of software. PDTs have the opportunity to dramatically change the healthcare landscape because they benefit all of the major stakeholders in the healthcare system. Patients prefer PDTs because they offer them 24/7 remote access without fear of stigma, and they also offer a favorable side effect profile versus medications. Clinicians in the US look for the improved reach that comes from dashboard utilization associated with the PDT, and they also are looking to reimbursable events that come with those dashboard-based interactions. Lastly, payers are able to utilize PDTs in order to address large gaps in care, but also to reduce overall healthcare costs. My company, Pear Therapeutics, is one of many companies in the PDT space. We are one of the pioneers in this space. We now have 3 FDA-authorized prescription digital therapeutics. Those are our Reset, Reset-O, and Somryst products for the treatment of addiction conditions and chronic insomnia, respectively. As I mentioned, these are quite large indications in the US, covering more than 50 million Americans in total, but even larger indications worldwide, covering more than 850 million patients worldwide. We've brought together those 3 commercial products with a deep and broad pipeline. Currently, we have 14 product candidates with the potential to improve care across a whole range of different therapeutic areas. We are a scale player, and our commercial and our development stage products all sit on the same end-to-end platform. And really the goal of our work is to make PDTs simple to use for patients, simple to prescribe for clinicians, and simple to reimburse for payers. I'd like to take just a little bit of time and give you some more information on our approved, on our pipeline, and on our platform. So again, we have 3 FDA authorized products. That is Reset for substance use disorder. That product is a monotherapy, so it's for use alone, and there's no drug for use in combination with the product. You have Reset-O, which is for opiate use disorder. That product is for use in combination with the pharmaceutical medication buprenorphine. And then lastly, you have Somryst, which is the only first-line guideline-recommended long-term treatment for chronic insomnia, with the opportunity to sit in front of habit-forming medications like benzodiazepines or like zolpidem. Across these 3 products, you can see how PDTs can treat conditions that were previously untreatable, like Reset. You can see how PDTs can work with drugs like Reset-O, and you can see how PDTs can even displace drugs like our Somryst product. Behind those 3 commercial products, we have what is a deep and broad pipeline. And for the space, this is really just the tip of the iceberg. You can see here a host of different products that treat different psychiatric conditions. Conditions like schizophrenia, like anxiety, depression, bipolar, and PTSD. You've also in the landscape seen an emergence of PDTs for the treatment of chronic neurologic conditions. And those are conditions like acute and chronic pain, migraine, multiple sclerosis, epilepsy, and in other companies, things like stroke. And then this is not a modality which is strictly for conditions of the brain. You are starting to see PDTs come across the landscape that treat things like GI conditions, like oncology, and like cardiovascular conditions. Lastly, PDTs are not just about a therapeutic intervention. these are also tremendous ways to be able to collect patient data remotely. And so you can see at the bottom of the slide what is the beginnings of our work in digital biomarkers. Here, our long-term vision is to incorporate digital biomarkers in order to really modify the content of a prescription digital therapeutic in real time, and to do things like titrate the dose of a pharmaceutical medication, all in the service of enhancing efficacy and all in the service of treating disease. All of the products that I just mentioned, either on the commercial side or in our pipeline, are the product of Pear's PDT engine. And that engine has two parts. The part on the left-hand side of the slide is our engine for the creation of prescription digital therapeutics from discovery through regulatory approval. And that is things like our component library of therapeutic and digital biomarker modalities. It is our in-licensing engine to be able to access new technologies. It is a remote clinical trials infrastructure, which is designed specifically for the development of prescription digital therapeutics. And then it is our work in quality with our quality system, which is 21 CFR 820 compliant and ISO 13485 compliant, as well as our work with the regulators here in the US, the FDA, via their pre-certification pilot program. On the right-hand side of the slide, you can see the platform, which is really capable of commercializing prescription digital therapeutic after prescription digital therapeutic. And that's made up of things like our Pear.MD clinician dashboard. It's made up of our patient services center and specialty pharmacy. That's called Pear Connect. It's made up of our data infrastructure to be able to bring together data all the way from the patient through to the clinician, and then even through to claims data sets. And then finally, it's our integration into telemedicine, as well as our relationships and commercial presence with specialty physicians, as well as with payers or insurance companies here in the US. And so what I've given you here is just a very brief overview of the space. And I've given you a brief overview of the work that Pear has been doing within that space. And so I'd like to just end with a little bit of imagination here. And so I'd like the audience to imagine a world where most medical conditions are treated by clinically validated software-based therapeutics called prescription digital therapeutics, or PDTs. Imagine these as integrated solutions for the whole patient across disease indications and comorbidities. Imagine digital monotherapies and more complex products utilizing drug software combinations, digital biomarkers, and learning algorithms. And then lastly, imagine the convenience and benefit to patients, the reach for clinicians, and the cost savings for payers. Personally, I believe this future world is a reality, and in the US as well as Korea. With regard to Korea, to promote the digital transformation of the Korean bio and healthcare industry, I believe Korea will need a cohort of hybrid companies with expertise in technology and healthcare. Those companies will need regulatory clarity, allowing for investment in clinical trials. The space will also need standardized reimbursement for both public and private payers. From these three factors, Korean companies can attract capital and also educate patients and clinicians, bringing together all of the elements required for proliferation of prescription digital therapeutics in Korea. With that, I'd like to again thank the conference for having us, and I hope you all have a good day at the conference. Thank you.
네, 첫 번째 기조 강연으로 함께해 주신 코리 맥켄 페어 테라피틱스 대표님께 감사를 드리겠습니다. 네, 이어지는 기조 연설은요, 글로벌 헬스케어에 있어서 불균형 해소를 위한 디지털 트랜스포메이션의 역할을 생각해 보겠습니다. 모두가 평등하게 누리는 글로벌 헬스케어를 위한 우리의 혁신에 대해서 그 가치와 의미를 함께 나눠보겠는데요. 두 번째 기조 by Chairman Hyung-wook Kim of Korea Digital Health Industry Association, and is also heading the Future of Value Office at KT.
네, 안녕하세요. 저는 한국 디지털 헬스 산업협회장이자
I am Chairman Hyung-wook of Korea Digital Health Industry Association and also working as a head of the Future Value Office at KHIDI Corporation. I'm very delighted and honored to give the keynote speech at the 5th Seoul International Biomedical Conference. Recently, World Knowledge Forum took place in Seoul, and Michael Sandel from Harvard University indicated that the imbalance is aggravating because of COVID-19 pandemic. The imbalance is becoming worse within the country and across the world. And particularly, the healthcare imbalance is directly linked to life of people. That is why it is even severer than any other imbalance. So today I'm going to talk about how to resolve this imbalance and inequality in healthcare. And the solution can be found in digital transformation. And I'm going to share my view on this topic with you. So without any notice, COVID-19 dawned on us. It made us think that everything that was taken for granted is not a matter, of course. We couldn't work from office, we had to do social distancing, and we always had to wear a face mask, and quarantine and preventive measures became part of life. And online delivery services and e-commerce had become a centerpiece of our lives. And furthermore, telemedicine, which was not allowed in Korea, were preliminarily and temporarily allowed in Korea. This new normal has brought to the fore based on digital transformation, and this is well understood. Satya Nadella last year, CEO of Microsoft, mentioned that in the span of 2 months, 2 years worth of digital transformation is taking place. Digital transformation is not an option, it is a must for survival. Because of COVID-19, healthcare industry and healthcare is also experiencing new wave of changes. As I mentioned before, in Korea, non-in-person or telemedicine was allowed, and SNS-based and other non-conventional digital clinical studies were allowed, and COVID-19 that was approved and developed in a short span of 9 months are now delivered to different patients and people around the world. Using AI, new therapeutics for new indications are being developed, shortening the time cycle for new drug development. Leading these changes are digital technologies. It is not an exaggeration to say digital transformation is mainstream. Because of COVID-19, the acceleration of change is inevitable. Nonetheless, as I mentioned at the outset, because of COVID-19, globally the inequality and imbalance is aggravating, particularly in the field of healthcare, areas where healthcare access is lacking. The imbalance will lead to a very deadly outcome. So how can we resolve imbalance and inequality in healthcare sector? I'm going to now turn to that topic. When you look at universal health coverage from WHO data, you can clearly see the imbalance between different countries around the world. And when you look at service capacity and healthcare access, as you can see from the graph, the differences or variances among different countries are quite noticeable. The reason behind this imbalance is because of low competitiveness, lack of infrastructure, and lack of government support and policy institution. The key is diseases that can easily treated in developed countries cannot be treated properly because of lack of infrastructure and because of lack of access to healthcare in underdeveloped countries. So when you look at life expectancy, there is big gap among developed and developing countries. If in developing countries, where people can have access to healthcare as they do in developed countries, would the life expectancy be this different? Is there any way for everyone on this planet to be healthy? So I can suggest boldly that we can find the solution in digital healthcare and digital technology. In all industries, digital transformation is ranging forward, and healthcare is not an exception. We see the contribution in digital healthcare. In prevention, diagnosis, treatment, and care, an entire continuum of healthcare, digital transformation is quite evident. In new drug development, digital technologies are being harnessed, coming to an enormous outcome. Let's look at some digital transformation cases in prevention. Due to COVID-19, people had to stay at home. And travel became out of the question for a lot of people. With vaccination, people who were dying to travel couldn't travel for 2 years. They're seeking breakthrough. Using digital vaccine based on blockchain, certification can be issued to ensure safe travel and transportation of people to prevent potential COVID-19 infection. The common project of Swiss World Economic Forum co-developed common paths for limited number of airlines and limited number of routes. These common paths are being used. And in December, in Korea, a Safe to Go pass started to be serviced. This application enables the outcome to be presented on the Safe to Go Pass app in a standardized format when the passenger completes inoculation. And this is about to be provided to the passengers leaving from international airport. Now let's turn to digital transformation in diagnostics. Imaging and voice, text, medical data accumulated in a massive volume. A lot of diagnostic solutions are being developed based on that. Korean company Lunit presented an AI-powered diagnostic solution for tuberculosis and breast cancer using AI-powered reading and interpretation of chest X-rays. And Vocalist Health specializes in diagnosis of pulmonary diseases, including COVID-19. So in diagnostics, using AI and medical big data, digital transformation is labeling. Healthcare professionals come up with more accurate and fast diagnostics and diagnosis. I think the application will be even wider going forward. And KT is working with Inha University for thyroid cancer, and with Asan Hospital, we are also seeking ways to identify swallowing disorders earlier than before. In treatment, telemedicine is a prime example. Because of COVID-19, face-to-face consultation was almost became impossible. Because of this, video telemedicine and phone-based telemedicine became part of life very naturally. In the US, in Japan, and in China, in order to supplement their existing healthcare industry, telemedicine were allowed in the past, but because of COVID-19, it will become more active. In Korea, telemedicine was temporarily allowed. According to the Ministry of Healthcare, more than 2 million consultations was given in telemedicine format. And when survey was conducted on telephone-based consultation, the satisfaction rate was almost 86%. Patients didn't need to spend a lot of time coming to the hospital, and they didn't need to wait for a long time exposing themselves to a potential infection at the hospital. because of these benefits, telemedicine will become mainstream way of healthcare delivery. And in treatment, wearable and digital devices become a crucial part of our life. Lifelog data can be collected in almost real time. This collected lifelog data can be utilized to analyze lifestyle and habits of different people. It can foresee the potential prevalence of or incidence of different diseases, although it will not be immediately visible. It will be able to monitor a patient to prevent these potential diseases. Serious Technology of Korea provides movie care. It continuously monitors heart rhythm to detect arrhythmia earlier than possible. So telemedicine goes beyond wearable, so it can lead to an transplantation of different devices inside human body. And there is also a new way of digital therapeutics using digital software and application. So it is emerging as an innovative technology in treatment. For example, in overseas markets, game-based ADHD treatment are being offered to kids, and app-based insomnia treatment, as was presented in the first keynote by Pear Therapeutics, became possible. Korea is seeking ways to promote the development of digital therapeutics. Korean government is also offering a lot of support. We are seeing revolution in drug discovery. Traditionally, drug development went through different phases of target identification, discovery screening, optimization to phase 1 to 3, clinical studies. It will take at least more than 10-15 years, and it will take billions of dollars, almost trillion Korean wons. So the cost, an investment made for new drug development was enormous. But when you utilize AI, it can dramatically reduce time spent for drug discovery, and it can reduce the risk of trial and error, and it can screen candidates faster. Many different benefits can be generated. AI-based drug development is harnessed very actively by UK company Scientia, and AI-based indication expansion company from the UK called Benevolent enabled only in 48 hours that bariatinib can be indicated for COVID-19. It was approved, FDA approved for emergency use. So in biomedical, using technology like AI will lead to positive outcome in health economics. However, digital health that I've talked about so far have very innovative advantage compared to traditional healthcare. First, everyone can access medical service no matter where they are. In the past, healthcare professional and the patient should be in the same space, but digital health broke down this barrier. Second, it enabled drastic savings in medical cost. In the past, trillion Korean won and many years had to be spent for new drug discovery. But thanks to AI, time can be shortened and the targeting can be more precise. And digital health, because it can be expanded to enormous scale, the savings in medical cost can be achieved. Digital health also creates 24/7 health monitoring. So it provides monitoring anytime, anywhere. In the past, only when the patient comes to a hospital, they can have active monitoring. But because of digital health, when regulatory requirements are met, patient's condition can be monitored on a continuous manner. So because of these benefits, digital healthcare can resolve inequality and imbalance. To elaborate on this, I will cite two examples. In underdeveloped countries, they do not have sufficient infrastructure for medical service and they do not have enough healthcare professionals. Whereas in developed countries, cutting-edge medical devices and infrastructure and healthcare professionals of high proficiency are available. And with the digital technology, the progress is made faster than before. If telemedicine or teleconsultation between these two different countries or many different countries are allowed, what do you think will happen? Even underdeveloped countries, they do have X-ray devices, X-ray machines, and healthcare professionals. So for example, X-ray image can be sent to a doctor in developed country, and they can use AI and their experience to offer faster and more accurate diagnosis. And based on his diagnosis, treatment and care for the patient can be prescribed faster. If a patient requires very difficult surgery and operation, of course, there are more issues to be dealt with, but simple prescription or simple treatment can be offered in a remote manner with very active communication and consultation between healthcare professionals in different countries. It will lead to an opportunity to save lives, literally. Second example has to do with drug development or treatment. In underdeveloped and developing countries, even with cancer diagnosis, because they do not have enough resources, they have to turn to very toxic and difficult to bear chemotherapy like doxorubicin. With digital transformation, if we can reduce and drive down the cost of novel anti-cancer drugs, in underdeveloped or developing countries, they can have better access to this new novel anti-cancer drugs because they will not be as expensive. And this can lead to better treatment for patients in underdeveloped and developing countries. As COVID-19 evidenced, we are living in a single village that is called Earth. We cannot really rest assured when one disease broke out in a certain corner of the world. We need to have access and right to good, healthy life, quality of life and healthcare for everyone, for some people in the world, will lead to better health for everyone on the planet. Of course, digital health will not be enough alone. We need one more thing, that is international collaboration leading to deregulation in many different countries. The examples I mentioned, such as telemedicine between countries and teleconsultation between countries, can only be possible when there is sufficient regulatory institution or deregulation in these countries. For an image taken in one country can be diagnosed in another, the X-rays should be sent without concern of private data protection, and different countries need to allow telemedicine at the government policy level to enable this. Doctors Without Borders used only 40 healthcare professionals in 2020 and offered 5,992 consultations in different countries, mainly in developing countries. But if a telemedicine and teleconsultation is allowed, Doctors Without Borders and activities in the same mission can be further activated, and this will uplift the quality of life of many people in developing countries. Another note on deregulation, with higher vaccine coverage rate in many countries are turning to new normal of living with corona. When this happens, the potential of coming in contact with people who are found positive with COVID-19 will increase, and this can drive up the concern of many people. If we can have visibility about how much we were exposed to COVID case patients, the unfounded concerns or anxiety can be resolved. For example, if you can just check from your app that I've been to same place with COVID convicted cases, we can get pre-screening. Bill Melinda Foundation is conducting different researches to act against contagious diseases. So infectious disease, quarantine, and self-screening, and prediction models are being developed with the support of the foundation. For this outcome to bear actual and practical fruit, the research data is of crucial importance. So different local governments in Korea do have data regarding where COVID-19 patients were, and if these data can be provided to public good application, of course without exposing personally identifiable information, this will make possible that one person can understand that your route or your journey today didn't coincide with any COVID-19 patient, or without exposing where actually these COVID-19 patients were. Of course, this can only be possible with strict management of privacy policy, private data protection. The user can easily identify if the course of their activity that day coincide with a course of activity with COVID-19 patient. I cautiously suggest if this anonymous data can be offered to a public good application, many people can benefit from it. They can quell unfounded, without ground concern and anxiety, and people can benefit from this. Korea is a digital powerhouse and is a very dynamic country. With K-quarantine, Korea set an example in the global stage in the fight against COVID-19. We've moved very fast, drawing a lot of attention from the international community. So maybe we can be a leader in deregulating actively to enable the potential of resolving inequality and imbalance of digital health even further. Thank you very much for your attention.